Welcome to King Kong Kids Storytime. We are starting the story of Ali and the Golden Eagle by Wayne Grover. Chapter 1, The Great Canyon. Bouncing and bumping along the rocky desert, leaving a trail of billowing brown dust, I saw a band of wild baboons scattering as I approached. The noisy Land Rover I was driving had startled them while they frolicked on the sloping plateau. They moved away in several directions, chattering excitedly. A large male, guarding the females and babies, screamed and waved his long arms angrily when he saw my vehicle coming toward his group. Just as I crested the next small rise, I had to jam on the brakes because several baboons were gathered right in front of me. The thick dust that was trailing the vehicle caught up and billowed past, surrounding me like a dark cloud. When it cleared, I was surprised to see the big male sitting on the rover's hood, peering in at me through the dust-covered windshield. Only the glass separated me from his ugly yellow teeth as he snarled fiercely, his lips pulled back. He jumped up and down on the hood, shaking the vehicle from side to side, screaming and pounding threateningly on his massive chest. Bam! Bam! With quick motions and brute strength, he hit the windshield with his hand-like front feet. Bam! Bam! The windshield broke, sending a web of cracks in every direction. Bam! 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 He kept hitting it, but the safety glass kept him from coming right in with me. Jamming the rover into gear again, I popped the clutch and the vehicle jumped, dislodging the baboon, which agilely leaped aside. He ran after me for a few dozen feet, but soon tired and stopped. Looking back over my shoulder, I saw the big male rejoin his band, still excited about my surprise visit. I knew from past experiences that the wild baboons of the Arabian high desert could be very dangerous. The bands, numbering in the hundreds, hung around the walled-in living areas called compounds, where foreign workers like me lived while in Arabia. The baboons were sometimes able to get inside the high protective wall and scavenge food from the refuse. To tangle with a full-grown male baboon would be asking for trouble, but as long as I stayed in my vehicle, I would be safe. The morning sky was deep azure blue from horizon to horizon, with not a wisp of a cloud in sight as I drove the Land Rover over the rocky terrain of the high Saudi Arabian desert. When I first arrived in Arabia to fulfill a 2-year contract to teach Saudi Arabians how to manage airports and radar systems, I expected the climate to be very hot and dry, and I wasn't disappointed. The Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh sweltered in the 120-degree oven-like days. I was pleasantly surprised to learn I would be assigned to the western side of Arabia, where the mountainous terrain created a cool climate all year. The city of Khamis Mushiat, where I lived while working for an American aircraft company, was at an elevation of nearly 9,000 feet, making the nights chilly and the days perfect. My new boss told me there were a series of canyons close by, much like the Grand Canyon in Arizona, and I wanted to see them for myself. The first chance I got, I went to look for the canyons. It was exciting to be exploring the Saudi desert. As I looked out across the high plateau, I saw nothing but rocky soil and scattered thorn bushes. A few wild burros and camels were grazing on the sparse vegetation. On the horizon rose a massive rocky mound that stood a good 1,500 feet above the flat plateau region, and I steered my rover toward it. I kept wondering how such a huge canyon could be hidden from my sight, but try as I might, all I could see was the rocky mound ahead. I was driving about 30 miles an hour when suddenly, right in front of me, I saw the earth end. My heart leaped as I jammed on the brakes. The rover skidded to a halt with the front wheels exposed over a canyon that dropped away for thousands of feet. Very gently, I shifted into reverse and backed into the swirling cloud of dust, away from the yawning chasm that had appeared out of nowhere. Whew, I said aloud while I sat listening to my heart pound. Then I got out and carefully walked back to the canyon edge. The sight that greeted me was so indescribably beautiful, I was awestruck. I had been on a gentle upslope on the plateau, which ran right up to the sharp drop-off. If I had looked away or had been driving faster, I would have hurtled out into a space over a 7,000-foot drop. After I had regained my composure, I reminded myself that Arabia was not Arizona. There were no roads to the canyon, no signs, and no safety rails. What I saw few Americans had ever seen. The great Arabian Canyon dropped away in a dozen huge abysses that stretched as far as the eye could see. I was transfixed by its beauty. Carefully, I crept over to the edge and stood on a granite outcrop so I could look down into the canyon. The morning sun had not yet lighted the lower depths, making it appear dark and ominous so far below me. I had visited the Grand Canyon in Arizona, and it was indeed a spectacular sight. But the vast beauty of this remote chasm in far western Arabia took my breath away. I had never seen such sheer drops and vertically flat rock surfaces. It was as if a giant had cut the earth with an axe. As I stood there with the cool morning wind blowing against me, I became aware of a soft, fluttering sound like a sail in the wind. The sound became louder and louder. Suddenly, I saw them. 3 large golden eagles were rising from deep within the canyon, using the warm air thermals to float upward. The fluttering was the air moving across their wingtip and tail feathers. The family of eagles soared up and out of the canyon almost at my feet and seemed surprised to see me there on the rim. They were evidently out for their morning hunt, with the large male leading the way. I was struck by their size and beauty. As they disappeared in the distance, other eagles rose from the canyon. Then hawks, falcons, and numerous smaller birds came up too. I watched an unending parade of feathered creatures soaring up on the warm air. This remote part of the world was nearly untouched by modern people and their machines, so the animal and bird life was in a natural state. I walked along the edge with my binoculars hanging on my chest, watching the soaring birds, unaware of anything else. Suddenly, a movement caught the corner of my eye. A tawny-colored blur had raced out from a rocky outcropping and stood watching me. It was an old, scrawny lion, as surprised to see me as I was to see him. We stood there, looking at each other. I wondered how many steps I could take back toward the rover before he caught up with me. The old lion didn't seem too anxious to bother me, and I certainly was not going to bother him. He watched me for a moment, then sat down as if he were tired and started scratching. Scratch, scratch. He yawned and lay down. I had been told there were a few African lions left on this side of the Red Sea from across from East Africa, but I never expected to see any. I slowly backed up to my rover, got in quickly, and closed the door. I needed some distance from the lion, so I started the engine and drove cautiously over the rock-strewn surface for about a mile. I stopped, got out, and again stood on the canyon edge, studying the patterns and colors inside the great chasm. About 2/3 of the way down the near wall, I could see a sloping area that looked nearly level, where the canyon wall gave way to a deeply gutted runoff. Water had scoured the earth for 1,000,000 years to form ragged gullies. Something about the flat brown surface looked a little different, so I put my binoculars to my eyes for a better view. I couldn't believe what I saw. There were houses on the flattened spot, deep within the canyon. I focused the glasses even tighter and could see people moving about. When I looked with my unaided eyes, all I could see was an uneven brown blur. I walked along the rim until I was directly above the group of houses. Through the binoculars, they appeared to be made from adobe, like American Indian pueblos in Arizona and New Mexico. They had flat roofs, and some had raised tower-like structures, square in shape. I decided to lie down on the ground and look into the chasm with just part of my head extending over the edge. The sun was just lighting the depths of the canyon with its scarlet morning glow, creating an array of subtle colors. As I lay, peering down at the strange sight, a faint sound of voices, carried by the wind, drifted up to my ears. I recognized the Islamic prayer call as the last word echoed from the canyon walls. Allah, 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 Allah. It was the standard chant used by Muslims the world over when they assembled to pray. I looked through my binoculars and saw several men and boys standing in 3 lines abreast while one man stood before them to lead the prayer. I aimed the binoculars around the village and saw the women assembled in their black chadors praying separately in another area. As I watched them say their prayers far below, I felt I had intruded on their private lives, so I pulled back and stood up. I wondered how the people of this remote village got out of the canyon. It was a mystery. I thought about it for the rest of the day as I crawled over rocks and ridges, exploring the area near the rim of the canyon. I watched wild camels and burros grazing on tiny green leaves, tucked deep in between long thorns on bushes and trees scattered across the desert. As I headed back to the compound late that afternoon, I was still curious about the village deep in the canyon. I wanted to find a way to see it close up and perhaps meet some of the villagers in person. Determined to accomplish that goal, I spent my free time after work the next week planning and gathering the supplies I would need.